My sister stood up at my birthday dinner, raised her wine glass, and told everyone at the table that she'd been raising my kids better than I ever could. And then she asked if she could move into my guest room to be more present for them. My stomach dropped so fast I couldn't even feel my legs under the table, and for a second I thought I'd misheard her, but she was smiling, genuinely smiling, like she'd just offered me a gift and was waiting for me to say thank you. I'm 35. I've been married for 9 years. I work full-time in project management, and I have 2 kids, an 8-year-old daughter named Claire and a 6-year-old son named Betrayal. My younger sister Megan is 32, single, no kids, and for as long as I can remember, she's been the golden child. I moved out at 18 and worked through college. She stayed home, stayed close to our parents, and never really had to fight for anything. I don't resent that, or at least I didn't think I did, but over the years she settled into this role of being the fun aunt, the one who showed up with gifts and took the kids to the zoo and didn't have to deal with bedtime meltdowns or homework battles or any of the actual hard parts of raising them. And honestly, for a long time I appreciated it. I was exhausted most of the time. My husband, Dan, works long hours, and I was juggling deadlines and school drop-offs and trying to keep the house from falling apart, and Megan stepping in felt like help. She'd take Claire and Ben for Saturday afternoons, bring them back sugared up and happy, and I'd get a few hours to breathe. It felt fine. It felt normal. But over the last year, her comments started changing. Little things at first. She'd say stuff like Claire didn't want to talk to me about something, so she came to her instead, or Ben wished I didn't work so much. She'd say it casually, like she was just passing along information, but there was this edge to it, this little smile that made my chest tighten even though I couldn't explain why. I told myself I was being sensitive. I was tired. I was probably overreacting. Dan didn't seem bothered by it, and my mom would just laugh and say Megan loved the kids, which was true, so I let it go. I kept letting it go. And then came my birthday. I'd spent the whole day cooking. I made lasagna from scratch, garlic bread salad, the whole thing, because that's what I do every year. My parents came over, Megan came over, Dan's sister joined us, and the kids were running around hyped up on cake frosting before we'd even eaten. It was loud and chaotic and normal, and I was happy. I was actually happy. We sat down to eat, and about halfway through the meal, Megan stood up. She had this wine glass in her hand, and she tapped it with her fork like she was about to make a toast, and everyone got quiet and turned to look at her. I figured she was going to say something nice, something about me being a good mom or whatever. And then she said it. The table went completely silent. My mom stopped eating. Dan stood up so fast I knew he was done. Megan was still smiling, waiting like she expected applause or gratitude or something, and I couldn't breathe. I sat there staring at her, trying to understand what had just come out of her mouth, and my brain couldn't catch up. I kept replaying the sentence, trying to find a version of it that made sense, that didn't mean what it sounded like it meant, but there wasn't one. Dan told her she needed to leave, and she laughed at first like he was joking, but then she looked at me like I was supposed to step in and calm everyone down. She doubled down, claimed she'd been basically co-parenting anyway, and her lease had just ended so moving in made sense. And I finally found my voice, but it came out shaky and quiet, and I just told her to go. She didn't believe me at first. She looked around the table like someone was going to defend her, but no one said anything. My mom looked down at her plate. Dan's sister was staring at Megan like she'd grown a second head. Megan grabbed her purse and stood up, accused me of always being jealous of her, and then she left. Just walked out, slammed the door behind her. I sat there shaking, and Dan put his hand on my shoulder, and my mom finally looked up and said she was sure Megan didn't mean it like that. But she did. I knew she did. The next morning, I woke up feeling sick. I kept replaying the dinner, trying to figure out how I'd missed it getting this bad, and I couldn't eat breakfast. Dan had already left for work, and the kids were at the table eating cereal, and I just stood there staring at them, wondering what Megan had been saying to them when I wasn't around. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to make it a thing, but I couldn't let it go either. So after I dropped Ben at school, I kept Claire home for a few extra minutes and asked her if Aunt Megan had ever said anything weird about me. Claire's face changed. Not a lot, but enough that I noticed, and she looked down at her hands and didn't answer right away. I didn't push. I just waited. Finally, she told me Megan had said I didn't really understand her like she did, and that if she lived with her, everything would be more fun. My chest went tight and I tried to keep my voice calm, but my hands were shaking. And I asked if there was anything else, and Claire just shrugged and said, Megan told her I was always tired. I hugged her and told her none of that was true, and that Aunt Megan was wrong. And then I took her to school and sat in the car for 10 minutes trying not to cry. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how long this had been going on, or how deep it went, and I felt so stupid for not seeing it sooner. When I got home, I called my mom. I needed to know if she'd known, if Megan had been saying things to her too, and my mom sighed before she even answered, which told me everything. She admitted Megan had been telling her I was overwhelmed, and that she'd been helping a lot, and I seemed grateful for it. I asked if she'd mentioned wanting to move in, and my mom said she had, but she thought Megan was just trying to be supportive. I told her what happened at dinner, the exact words Megan used, and there was a long pause before my mom said she was sure she didn't mean it like that. I said she absolutely did, and my mom didn't argue, but she didn't agree either, just said she'd talked to Megan, which felt like nothing, and I hung up feeling more alone than I had before I called. I spent the rest of the day going through Megan's social media, which I almost never looked at, and I found dozens of photos of my kids. Photos I didn't even know she'd taken. Captions like my babies and mommy time and best day with my littles. There were comments from people I didn't even know saying things like, "You're such a good mom and they're so lucky to have you," and I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I texted her. I told her she wasn't welcome back until she apologized and understood how far she'd crossed. She didn't respond for hours, and when she finally did, it was just one sentence accusing me of being jealous and taking it out on the kids. I blocked her number. Dan came home that night and found me sitting on the couch staring at nothing, and I told him everything. The things Claire said, the social media posts, the text. He pulled me into a hug and said she wasn't coming back here ever, and I nodded, but I didn't feel relief. I just felt tired. And part of me, a small, stupid part of me, wondered if I'd overreacted. If maybe she really had just been trying to help and I'd blown it up into something bigger than it was. I hated that I was even thinking it, but I couldn't stop. The next 2 weeks were quiet in a way that felt raw. Megan didn't try to contact me, but she showed up at the house twice. The first time I didn't answer the door, and she stood outside ringing the bell for 5 minutes before she finally left, and I watched her from the upstairs window with my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to be sick. The second time Dan answered and told her if she didn't leave he'd call the police, and she yelled through the door that I was keeping her away from the kids she loved before she finally left. I started getting texts from extended family asking what was going on, saying Megan seemed really upset, and I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't have the energy to explain, and I knew anything I said would get back to Megan twisted into something else. Then my mom called and said there was a family barbecue coming up in 2 weeks, and she asked if I was still coming. I told her I'd be there, but if Megan was there, I wasn't engaging. And my mom said she understood, but her voice was tight, like she was trying to keep the peace and didn't want to pick a side. The barbecue was at my uncle's house, and I almost didn't go. Dan said we didn't have to, but I didn't want to give Megan the satisfaction of thinking she'd run me off, so we went. Megan was already there when we arrived, and the second she saw me, I could feel her staring, and it made my skin crawl. I ignored her. I helped the kids get food. I talked to my uncle. I acted like everything was fine, but I could feel her watching me the whole time. About an hour in, my cousin Rachel pulled me aside and told me she'd seen some of Megan's posts about the kids, the ones where she was calling them hers, and she asked if that was weird. I said yeah, it was, and she admitted a bunch of them had been talking, and it seemed like Megan had been telling people she was basically raising them. I told her she had, and Rachel's whole expression changed, like she'd thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding, but now she knew it wasn't. She hugged me and then walked over to where some relatives were standing and said something I couldn't hear, and a few of them glanced over at Megan, and then my Aunt Linda went over. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Megan's voice got louder, and she was trying to defend herself, saying she was just trying to help, and she loved those kids. And Linda asked why she was calling them hers, and Megan didn't have an answer for that. She looked around like she was waiting for someone to defend her, but no one did. My mom was standing a few feet away, and she didn't say anything. Megan grabbed her purse and left without saying goodbye to anyone. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel vindicated or satisfied. I just felt exhausted. The weeks after that were quieter. Megan stopped showing up at the house. She stopped texting. My mom called once to say Megan was struggling and that maybe I should reach out, but I didn't. I wasn't ready, and I wasn't sure I'd ever be. Claire asked about her a few times. She'd say things like, "Is Aunt Megan mad at us?" And I'd tell her no, that Aunt Megan made some mistakes and we were taking a break and it wasn't her fault. Ben didn't ask as much, but I could tell he noticed she wasn't around. He'd mention her sometimes, like remember when Aunt Megan took us to the trampoline place, and I'd just nod and change the subject. About 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Megan. Handwritten, not typed, and it was long. She said she was sorry. She said she'd lost perspective, and that she'd been spending so much time with the kids she'd started to feel like they were hers, and she didn't realize how far she'd crossed until everyone turned on her. She said she missed them and she missed me, and she understood if I never wanted to talk to her again, but she hoped I'd consider letting her try to rebuild trust. I read it twice. Dan read it too. We talked about it for a long time, and eventually I decided to respond. I told her I appreciated the apology, but that trust wasn't something I could just hand back, and if she wanted to be in the kids' lives again, it would have to be slow, and it would have to be on my terms. She agreed. It's been a year now. Megan sees the kids once a month, supervised, and she doesn't take them anywhere alone. She doesn't post about them on social media. She doesn't make comments about my parenting. She's just an aunt now. Not the fun aunt. Not the golden child. Just an aunt. Claire and Ben seem okay with it. They ask why things changed, and I haven't told them the full story. Maybe I will someday, but not yet. My birthday this year was quiet. No big dinner. No speeches. Just cake with my husband and kids, and a few close friends. Megan wasn't there and I didn't miss her. Dan and I are solid. The kids are good. I'm still tired most of the time, but it's the normal kind of tired, the kind that comes from just living your life and doing your best. Thank you for listening to this. I know it's not the most dramatic ending, but that's kind of the point. Sometimes karma isn't explosive. Sometimes it's just boundaries finally holding, and people finally seeing what was always true. I post stories like this every day, so if this one resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you stuck around. Take care of yourselves. Good night.